The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched above Minho Kim like a cathedral of metal and light. He stood alone in the center of the circular floor, his hands bound behind his back with energy restraints that hummed softly. Around him, rising in massive tiers that reached toward the domed ceiling, sat the representatives of 17 species. Some had faces he could almost recognize. Others were so alien that looking at them too long made his head hurt. Minho had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years. He had walked these halls countless times, shaking hands in tentacles and appendages that had no name in human language. He had smiled and negotiated and compromised. He had truly believed that humanity could find its place among the stars through peace and diplomacy. Now he understood how wrong he had been. The Valkyrian Archon spoke from his elevated throne. The translator implant in Minho's ear turned the clicking and whistling sounds into cold, formal words. Minho Kim of Earth, you have been found guilty of violating the sacred Concordat. Your species has expanded beyond permitted boundaries. You have built military installations in forbidden space. You have refused to submit to council authority. Minho wanted to laugh. Every charge was a lie or a distortion. The colonies humanity had established were in unclaimed territories. The military installations were defensive stations, nothing more. And refusing to submit? That was the real crime in their eyes. Humanity refused to bow and scrape like the younger species were expected to do. I request permission to speak, Minho said, keeping his voice steady, even as his heart hammered in his chest. The Archon's 3 eyes blinked in sequence. You may speak. It will change nothing. Minho looked up at the assembled council. Somewhere out there, billions of beings across the galaxy were watching this trial through quantum broadcasts. This was meant to be a lesson, a warning to any species that dared to challenge the established order. Everything I showed you was true, Minho said. The star charts proved those territories were unclaimed. The colony ships were civilian vessels. We followed every rule in the Concordat. You're not executing me for breaking your laws. You're executing me because humanity scares you. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some species clicked or hummed or made noises the translator couldn't interpret. The Archon raised one long, thin arm for silence. Humanity is young and aggressive, the Archon said. In 200 years, you have spread to 40 star systems. You build warships at a rate that concerns us. Your population grows without control. Your expansion is relentless. We have seen species like yours before. They always bring war and chaos. The Council exists to maintain order and peace. Peace through subjugation, Minho shot back. Peace through keeping younger species in chains. We studied your history, Archon. We know what you did to the Korthan people when they refused to accept Council authority. We know about the blockades and the sanctions and the occupations. You don't maintain peace. You maintain power. The chamber erupted. Several species began shouting or making their equivalent of angry sounds. The Archon's face, if it could be called a face, remained expressionless. This is why you must die, the Archon said simply. And this is why humanity must be taught its place. The sentence is death by molecular disintegration. The execution will be carried out immediately. Minho felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had known this was coming. Earth's intelligence. Services had warned him that the Council planned to make an example of humanity. They had sent him anyway, hoping that his presence and his words might change some minds. It had been a fool's hope. 2 guards, members of a species that looked like upright walking crystals, moved toward him. They carried devices that looked like metal rods. Minho knew what those were. Molecular disintegrators. They would pull apart every atom in his body, turning him into nothing more than light and heat. I have final words, Minho said loudly. The Archon gestured for the guards to wait. Minho looked. up at the vast array of cameras and recording devices floating around the chamber. This would be broadcast everywhere. Good. He needed everyone to hear this. My name is Minho Kim. I am the son of refugees who fled war on Earth. My grandparents survived the Third World War. My great-grandparents survived the Second. Humanity has always survived. We survive because we remember. We remember every slight, every betrayal, every murder. He took a breath. His voice grew harder, colder. You think killing me will frighten Earth into submission. You're wrong. You have no idea what you've just done. Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive. Whatever happens next, remember that you brought it on yourselves. The Archon made a gesture. The guards moved forward. Minho didn't struggle as they raised their weapons. He kept his eyes open, staring directly at the nearest camera. He wanted the people of Earth to see him face death without fear. The devices activated. He felt a strange tingling sensation spread through his body. Then pain, brief and intense, followed by a feeling of coming apart. His last thought was of his daughter playing in their garden back on Earth. Then there was light and heat and nothing. 17,000 light-years away, in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Fleet Admiral Haijin Park watched the execution on a wall-sized screen. She sat alone in her command chair, tears streaming down her weathered face. She had known Minho since they were both young officers. She had recommended him for the ambassador position, and now she had watched him die. Her hand moved to the red crystal embedded in her command console. It was warm to the touch, pulsing slightly with inner light. Next to it was a keypad that required both her handprint and a 16-digit code that only 3 people in the solar system knew. Haijin had hoped she would never have to touch this crystal. Its very existence was humanity's darkest secret. The Annihilation Protocol had been created 200 years ago by the founders of Earth's united government. It was meant to be the ultimate deterrent, the guarantee that if humanity ever faced extinction, they would not go quietly into the night. She entered the code with steady fingers. She pressed her palm against the scanner. Red light washed over her hand, reading her DNA, her fingerprints, her pulse. The system confirmed her identity. Voice confirmation required, the computer said in a neutral tone. Fleet Admiral Haijin Park, she said clearly. Authorization Omega-1. I hereby activate the Annihilation Protocol. Stage 1. God forgive us all. The crystal began to glow brighter. Deep within Earth's core, in chambers built from materials that shouldn't exist according to known physics, ancient machines woke from their long sleep. These machines had been waiting for this moment, hoping it would never come. Now they began their terrible work, across human space, on 40 worlds and 300 stations and aboard 2,000 ships. Similar crystals began to glow, quantum entangled. Signals moved faster than light itself, carrying the activation codes to weapon systems that had been hidden and waiting for 2 centuries. A galaxy had executed a human envoy. Now the galaxy would learn what that meant. Haijin sat in her chair, watching the status displays light up one by one, each representing another weapon system coming online. She didn't move. She didn't blink. She had a job to do, and she would see it through to whatever end awaited them all. The Annihilation Protocol was active. There was no turning back now. The first indication that something was wrong came 12 hours after Minho Kim's execution. A trade convoy carrying medical supplies from Earth to the neutral trading hub at Kepler Station simply turned around in mid-journey. The station's traffic controller tried to hail the ships. No response. The automated systems showed the ships were fully functional. They just stopped responding to any communication and reversed course back toward Earth. Within the next 6 hours, it happened everywhere. Human ships across the galaxy went silent. Not just military vessels, but civilian transports, scientific research craft, and merchant haulers. They all stopped talking. They all began moving back toward human-controlled space. The borders of human territory, which had been busy with constant traffic for decades, went completely dark. Ambassador Sora Han stood in her small apartment on Council Station, watching the news feeds with growing dread. She had been Minho's deputy for 3 years. She knew him well. She had stood in the viewing gallery during his trial, forbidden from speaking, forced to watch as they murdered her friend and mentor. Now she watched as humanity's response began to unfold. Her communication console beeped. A priority message, encrypted with codes she recognized. It was from Earth Command. Her hands shook as she entered her decryption keys. The message was brief and clear. All human personnel were to evacuate Council space immediately. She had 48 hours. After that, she was on her own. Sora looked around her apartment. 5 years of her life were in this room. Books, artwork, mementos from a dozen different worlds. She began packing only what she could carry. Everything else would have to stay behind. On the trading station orbiting the world of Vex Prime, Terran Cho was moving much faster. She was an intelligence operative, officially listed as a cultural attach in the human embassy. Her real job was gathering information and running a network of informants across Council space. She had 16 hours to extract as many human civilians as possible before the window closed. Terran had known about the Annihilation Protocol. Not the details, but enough to understand what activation meant. She moved through the crowded corridors of the station, contacting every human she could find. Most believed her. Some thought she was crazy. She didn't have time to convince them. Those who listened followed her to the docking bay where a human courier ship waited. "How many can we fit?" She asked the pilot, a woman named Bowman who asked no questions and followed orders. Officially? 80. Unofficially, if we pack them in and they don't mind breathing each other's air? Maybe 200, Bowman replied. Start loading. We leave in 3 hours, whether we're full or not. Terran went back into the station. There were over 800 humans in this sector. She couldn't save them all. The thought made her sick, but she pushed it down. Save who she could. That was all anyone could do now. Meanwhile, on the frontier colony of New Bizon, Ji-Wan Lee was facing a different kind of chaos. The colony had been established only 6 years ago. 3 million people called it home now. They had built cities and farms and families. And now Ji-Wan, as the civilian administrator, had to tell them to abandon everything. The emergency broadcast went out at local dawn. All colonists were to report to designated evacuation zones immediately. Bring only essential items. Food and water would be provided. The message repeated every 5 minutes in a dozen languages. Ji-Wan stood in the command center, watching the feeds from across the planet. People were panicking. Of course they were panicking. She couldn't tell them the real reason for the evacuation. The truth was classified at the highest level. All she could say was that it was a matter of planetary security and that compliance was mandatory. Administrator Lee were getting reports of riots in the southern districts. Her security chief said, "People are demanding answers. Send peacekeepers. Non-lethal force only. These are scared people, not criminals," Ji-Wan ordered. She felt ancient. She was only 38, but right now she felt like she carried the weight of centuries. Beneath the colony's main city, hidden in caverns that the original survey teams had expanded and reinforced, waited the evacuation ships. They weren't meant for comfort. They were generation ships, massive vessels designed to carry millions of people for decades if necessary. They had been built in secret, their construction disguised as mining operations. Every human colony had them. It was standard procedure, though most colonists never knew they existed. The loading process would take days. Jiwan had 4 days before the deadline. After that, anyone still on the planet would likely die. She didn't know the exact details of what was coming, but the evacuation orders had been clear. This entire sector of space was being cleared of human presence for a reason. Back on Earth, in research facilities scattered across 3 continents, scientists worked around the clock to maintain the systems that were powering up. Dr. Sung-Ho Beek hadn't slept in 30 hours. He stood in front of a holographic display showing the quantum calculations flowing through the protocol's network. The numbers were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "The dimensional stress is increasing faster than predicted," said Dr. Yuna Kong, his colleague and the only other person in the room. She looked as exhausted as he felt. "If we maintain this level of power for more than 72 hours, we could cause permanent damage to local spacetime." "That's kind of the point," Sun-Ho said, though his voice lacked conviction. He understood the science behind the Annihilation Protocol. Understanding didn't make it any less horrifying. They weren't just building weapons. They were threatening to tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. The protocol worked by creating artificial singularities at carefully calculated points throughout the galaxy. These singularities would destabilize stars, collapse wormholes, and create cascading gravitational failures. It was less a weapon and more a way to break the universe. If fully activated, the protocol wouldn't just kill billions. It would set galactic civilization back thousands of years. "How many systems are in the target range?" Yuna asked quietly. 3,000 star systems. Mostly Council core worlds and major trade routes. The economic collapse alone would be catastrophic, even if they managed to prevent the actual stellar destabilizations, Sun-Ho replied. "Can they prevent them?" Sun-Ho was silent for a long moment. "I don't think so. That's what makes this so terrifying. Once Stage 2 activates, I'm not sure even we can stop it. The cascade becomes self-sustaining." Yuna sat down heavily in a chair. "So we're really doing this. We're threatening to destroy the galaxy because they killed one man." "They killed one man to send a message," Sun-Ho corrected. "They wanted to show humanity its place. Admiral Park is sending a different message. If you push humanity to extinction, we'll take everyone with us." The Galactic Council began to understand this message as reports flooded in. Human space had gone completely silent. Every communication channel was dead. Every diplomatic mission was evacuating. And sensors were detecting massive energy buildups throughout human territory. Energy signatures that matched nothing in known physics. The Valkyrian Archon, who had ordered Minho's execution with such confidence, now sat in an emergency session with the full council. The mood was no longer triumphant. Fear had begun to creep in. "What are they doing?" demanded a representative from the Kellian Compact. "What kind of weapons generate these readings?" Nobody had an answer. Intelligence agencies across council space scrambled to analyze the data. They came back with nothing useful. Whatever humanity had built, they had kept it completely hidden for centuries. Not even the council's best spies had suspected anything like this existed. "We should send a diplomatic mission," suggested another council member. "Open negotiations. Find out what they want." "We already know what they want," the Archon said bitterly. "They want revenge. They want us to pay for killing their ambassador. The question is, what price will satisfy them?" The chamber fell silent. Outside the windows, the stars shone peacefully, unaware of the catastrophe brewing in the darkness. Somewhere out there, humanity was preparing to do something terrible, and the galaxy was about to learn that threatening. Earth's children came with consequences beyond imagination. The silence stretched on, and in that silence, the galaxy began to fear. Commander Dayan Song stood on the bridge of the Immortal, watching the view screen display the vast emptiness of space. His ship wasn't like the sleek cruisers and destroyers, that made up Earth's conventional fleet. The Immortal was massive, ugly, and built for only one purpose. It was a reality anchor, designed to hold a piece of space-time in place while the universe around it tried to tear itself apart. "Status report," Dayan said to his crew. "All systems operational, Commander. Quantum entanglement with the network is stable. We're holding position at coordinates Alpha 77, reported his executive officer, a young man named Juno, who looked far too calm for what they were about to do. Dayan pulled up the tactical display. 300 ships like his were positioned throughout the galaxy, each one at a carefully calculated point. They formed a web, invisible but deadly. When the order came, these ships would activate their primary systems and begin the process of destabilizing reality itself. He had trained for this mission his entire career, hoping it would never come. Now here he was, holding the fate of trillions in his hands. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." Fleet Admiral Hyjin Park's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, older than he remembered. "Commander Song, status? Ready to execute on your order, Admiral. All anchor ships report green across the board. Good. Hold position. We're approaching the 72-hour mark. The Council still hasn't responded to our demands. If they don't, you know what comes next." Dayan nodded. "Understood, Admiral. We'll do our duty." The transmission ended. Dayan looked at his crew. They were all volunteers, all people who understood what the Annihilation Protocol meant. If Stage 2 activated, many of these ships wouldn't survive. The forces they would be unleashing didn't distinguish between friend and enemy. Reality didn't care about intentions. On the Council Station, Ambassador Sora Han had finally been granted an audience. It had taken 3 days of requests, threats, and eventually a direct warning that if they didn't meet with her, they would get their answer from weapons fire instead of words. Now she walked through the grand corridors toward the council chamber, carrying a data crystal in her pocket. The chamber was different from when Minho had stood here. That had been a public spectacle. This was a closed session. Only the 17 council members and their closest advisors were present. Sora felt their eyes on her as she walked to the center of the floor. Unlike Minho, she wasn't bound. Unlike Minho, she held all the power in this room, even if she was alone. "Ambassador Han," the Valkyrian Archon said. His voice was strained. "You requested this meeting. Speak." Sora pulled out the data crystal. "This contains Earth's official response to the execution of Ambassador Minho Kim. I suggest you watch it carefully." She activated the crystal. A holographic projection filled the center of the chamber. Fleet Admiral Hyjin Park appeared, standing at attention in her full dress uniform. Behind her, visible through windows, Earth rotated slowly in space. "To the Galactic Council," Hyjin began. Her voice was calm, measured, and absolutely cold. 3 days ago, you executed Ambassador Minho Kim. You did this to send a message, to show humanity its place, to frighten us into submission. I am here to tell you that you have failed, but you have accomplished something else. You have activated Earth's ultimate deterrent, the Annihilation Protocol. The hologram shifted. Now it showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of points highlighted in red. Sora watched the council members lean forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. 200 years ago, when humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, our leaders made a decision. They understood that we were entering a galaxy full of older, more powerful species. They understood that someday, someone might try to destroy us, so they built insurance. The Annihilation Protocol is that insurance. The holographic map zoomed in on one of the red points. It showed a human ship, similar to the one Commander Dayan commanded, positioned near a blue giant star. Hidden throughout our expansion are quantum-entangled devices capable of destabilizing stars, collapsing wormholes, and creating cascading gravitational failures. These devices have been waiting dormant for 2 centuries. 3 days ago, I activated them. Stage 1 is complete. All systems are operational and ready to execute. Admiral Park's image stepped forward, her expression hardening. If Stage 2 activates, 3,000 star systems will be affected. Most are Council core worlds. Your capital worlds, your industrial centers, your major population zones. The wormhole network that connects your civilization will collapse. The economic disruption alone will be catastrophic. But that's not the worst part. The hologram showed simulations now. Stars going supernova. Wormholes imploding. Planets being torn apart by gravitational shear. It was destruction on a scale that made war look like a children's game. The worst part is that once Stage 2 begins, it becomes self-sustaining. The gravitational failures cascade. One destabilized star affects the systems around it. Those systems affect others. Within a month, 10,000 systems will be affected. Within a year, the entire galactic core could be uninhabitable. Billions will die. Your civilization will end. The simulation showed the galaxy itself, with waves of destruction spreading from the red points like ripples in a pond. But these ripples brought death and ruin. Stage 2 will activate in 48 hours unless you meet our demands. These demands are non-negotiable. First, formal recognition of human sovereignty over all claimed territories. No restrictions, no council oversight. Second, reparations for the murder of Ambassador Min-Ho Kim. 5 trillion credits to be paid over 10 years. Third, permanent seats for humanity on the Council's executive board with full voting rights. And fourth, complete access to your historical archives, particularly the records from what you call the Forbidden Era. This last demand caused a stir in the chamber. Sora saw several council members exchange worried looks. She didn't understand why that particular demand mattered so much, but Admiral Park had been specific about it. You have 48 hours to respond, Admiral Park concluded. If you refuse, Stage 2 activates automatically. If you attack humanity in any way during these 48 hours, Stage 2 activates immediately. If you attempt to interfere with our anchor ships, Stage 2 activates immediately. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise. You executed our ambassador. These are the consequences. The hologram faded. The chamber was silent. Sora looked at the council members and saw fear in every alien face and expression. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them understand what it meant to threaten humanity. This is madness, one of the council members finally said. You would destroy the galaxy over one death? You killed him to send a message, Sora replied, her voice sharp. Admiral Park is sending one back. The message is simple. If you try to destroy humanity, we'll take you all with us. You wanted to show us our place. Now you know yours. You exist because we allow it. Remember that. The Valtharian Archon stood. This is blackmail. This is terrorism. This is survival, Sora shot back. You've ruled this galaxy for thousands of years. You've crushed younger species who didn't submit. You've maintained your power through intimidation and violence. Now you've met a species that refuses to be crushed. We will not submit. We will not bow. And we will not go quietly if you try to destroy us. The Council needs time to deliberate, the Archon said. You have 48 hours. Use them wisely. Sora turned and walked out of the chamber. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her pace steady, her head high. Only when she was back in the corridor did she allow herself to lean against a wall and take a deep breath. She had just threatened the destruction of galactic civilization. The weight of it pressed down on her like gravity. Her communicator chimed. It was Dr. Jiho An, calling from Earth. Ambassador Han, did they watch the message? Yes, they're terrified. Good, because I need to tell you something about that fourth demand, the Forbidden Era Archives. I know why Earth Command wants them. Why? Because we found something. Ancient ruins on a planet in the Outer Rim. The ruins are human. They're 10,000 years old. Humanity didn't just appear in the galaxy 200 years ago, Ambassador. We were here before, long before. And the Council knows it. They've been hiding our own history from us. Sora felt something cold settle in her stomach. What happened to them? The ancient humans? I don't know. That's what we need the archives to find out. But I can tell you this much. The technology we found in those ruins is more advanced than anything the Council has. The Annihilation Protocol? We didn't invent it. We rediscovered it. Someone built these weapons 10,000 years ago. Our ancestors built them, and then they vanished. The implications crashed over Sora like a wave. The Council hadn't just killed Minho to maintain their power. They had killed him because they feared what humanity might become. Or rather, what humanity might remember. 48 hours, Sora said quietly. In 48 hours, we'll have those archives, and then we'll know the truth. She ended the call and looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, 300 ships held the galaxy hostage. And somewhere in the past, an ancient human civilization had built those weapons and then disappeared. The galaxy was about to remember why humanity should never be pushed to the edge. Because when humanity fought back, they fought with the ghosts of empires at their backs. The Galactic Council was tearing itself apart from the inside. In the 24 hours since Ambassador Sora Han had delivered Earth's ultimatum, the unified front that had executed Minho Kim had shattered into a dozen competing factions. Some species wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender. Most simply wanted to survive. The Valtharian Archon sat in his private chambers, watching the news feeds from across the galaxy. Protests had erupted on dozens of worlds. People were demanding answers, demanding protection, demanding that their leaders do something to stop the humans from destroying everything. His own people were calling for his head. A knock came at his door. Before he could respond, it opened. 3 Valtharian military commanders entered, their faces grim. Archon, the eldest said, you need to come with us. On whose authority? On the authority of the Valtharian people. You ordered the execution of the human ambassador without proper authorization. You have brought catastrophe down on our heads. The High Senate has voted. You are removed from office, effective immediately. The Archon wanted to argue, to fight, but he saw the weapons they carried and the determination in their eyes. He stood slowly, with as much dignity as he could manage, and allowed them to escort him from his chambers. He had ruled for 30 years. Now he was a prisoner, about to be sacrificed to appease the humans. Perhaps it was fitting. They brought him to the council chamber, where Ambassador Sora Han waited with a full diplomatic escort. 50 human marines in powered armor stood behind her, weapons ready. The symbolism was clear and brutal. Humanity no longer asked for permission to enter these halls. They took what they wanted. Ambassador Han, the eldest Valtharian commander, said, we present to you the former Archon. He acted without proper authority when he ordered the execution of your ambassador. We offer him to you as partial restitution for our crime against your people. The Archon tried to maintain his composure, but Sora saw the fear in his eyes. Good. Let him feel what Minho had felt in his final moments. Your gesture is noted, Sora said coldly. However, one criminal is not enough. Earth's demands stand unchanged. You have 24 hours remaining. A new figure entered the chamber. Diplomat Minseo Park, Earth's chief negotiator, walked in flanked by more Marines. She was known throughout diplomatic circles as brilliant and ruthless. She had negotiated treaties with 6 different species and never once compromised on humanity's core interests. Now she carried a tablet containing Earth's final terms. "Counselors," Minseo said, her voice carrying through the chamber, "I am here to formalize negotiations. Time is running short. Let's be clear about what's at stake. In 24 hours, Stage 2 of the Annihilation Protocol activates. Once that happens, we estimate you have 3 months before galactic civilization collapses completely. Your wormhole network will be gone. Your trade routes will be cut. Your core worlds will be uninhabitable. You will be scattered across the galaxy, reduced to isolated pockets of survivors. That is your future if you refuse our terms." One of the council members, a being that resembled a floating jellyfish, spoke up. "You ask us to give you everything: territory, money, power, and our most sacred historical records. How can we trust that you will stop the protocol after receiving these concessions?" "You can't," Minseo said bluntly. "You have to take it on faith. Just as we had to take it on faith that you would treat our ambassador fairly. We see how that turned out. The difference is, we're not asking you to trust us. We're telling you that you have no choice. Accept our terms or face extinction. It's that simple." Dr. Jihoan stood near the back of the human delegation. He had been brought from Earth specifically for this negotiation because of his expertise in ancient civilizations. Now he stepped forward, addressing the council directly. "I want to talk about the Forbidden Era," he said. 10,000 years ago, something happened in this galaxy. The council's official history says it was a dark age, a time of chaos before the modern council was formed. But that's a lie, isn't it? We know the truth. We found the ruins. The council chamber went silent. Several members looked uncomfortable. Dr. Jiho pulled up a holographic display showing images from the archaeological dig on the outer rim planet humanity had discovered. "These ruins are human," he continued. "The DNA markers are unmistakable. The architecture, the art, the technology, all human in origin. But they're 10,000 years old. Humanity existed in this galaxy long before Earth achieved spaceflight 200 years ago. There was an empire, a human empire that spanned thousands of worlds. And then it vanished. You know what happened. Your archives contain the records. We want them. That information is forbidden for good reason," one council member said nervously. "Because you're afraid," Dr. Gio shot back. "You're afraid of what we might learn. You're afraid we might remember what we once were. That's why you've always tried to suppress humanity. Every time humans appear in the galaxy, you work to limit us, control us, eventually destroy us. You did it to our ancestors. You tried to do it to us. But this time, we built insurance. This time, we made sure that if you destroy us, you destroy yourselves too." Minseo raised her hand for silence. "Dr. On's research is fascinating, but it's also beside the point right now. The demand for the archive stands. You will provide complete, unredacted access to all records from the Forbidden's era. If you refuse, we will assume you are hiding information that threatens our survival, and we will act accordingly." The negotiations continued for hours. The council tried to bargain, tried to reduce the demands, tried to find compromises. Minseo refused every attempt. Earth's position was absolute. Accept all terms or face the protocol. Meanwhile, on Earth, Engineer Soman Yoon was facing a crisis of her own. She stood in the primary control center for the Annihilation Protocol, watching her screens with growing alarm. The quantum entanglement that held the network together was starting to destabilize. The strain of keeping thousands of reality anchors in standby mode was creating dimensional stress fractures. "How bad is it?" asked her supervisor, an older man named Kiwan who had helped design the protocol decades ago. Bad. The fractures are spreading. If we maintain current power levels for another 48 hours, we might cause permanent damage to local spacetime. And if we initiate Stage 2, I'm not sure we can stop Stage 3 from activating automatically. What's the probability of a full cascade? Soman ran the numbers again, hoping she had made an error. She hadn't. 73%. If Stage 2 initiates, there's a 73% chance that Stage 3 follows within 6 hours. At that point, we're looking at total universal collapse. Not just galactic civilization. Everything. Kiwan sat down heavily. Does Admiral Park know? I sent the report an hour ago. She hasn't responded. She's not going to back down. You know that. Even if there's a chance we destroy the universe itself, she won't stop. Not after what they did to Ambassador Kim. Soman understood. She agreed with the sentiment even. The Council had committed an act of war by executing Mino. They deserved to face consequences. But the idea of accidentally destroying reality itself was almost too horrifying to contemplate. Almost, because the alternative, letting humanity be crushed by the Council's tyranny, was somehow worse. Back on the Council station, the negotiations reached a critical point. The Council had voted. 14 species voted to accept Earth's terms. 3 voted to reject them. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The Council would capitulate. We accept your demands, the new Valtharian representative said. She was younger than the old Archon, and her voice carried both fear and resentment. All territories claimed by humanity are recognized as sovereign. Reparations will be paid. You will have seats on the executive board, and the archives will be open to you. Complete and unredacted access. Minseo pressed. Complete and unredacted. The representative confirmed bitterly. Min Iseo nodded to Sora, who activated her communicator. Ambassador Han to Earth Command. The Council has accepted our terms. Requesting orders. The response took a moment. Then Admiral Hyjin Park's voice came through, clear and firm. Acknowledged. Inform the Council that Stage 2 activation is suspended. However, the protocol remains active. All anchor ships will maintain position. The protocol will not be fully deactivated until Earth verifies that all terms have been met in full. Sora relayed the message. The Council chamber let out a collective sigh of relief. They had avoided immediate disaster. But everyone understood that the sword still hung over their heads. Humanity had proven it was willing to destroy everything if pushed. The galaxy would never forget that lesson. Dr. Jiho approached the Valtharian representative. The archives. When can we access them? Immediately, if you wish. We will provide you with full clearance and access codes. But I warn you, Doctor, what you find there will change everything. The Forbidden's era was forbidden for a reason. Your ancestors, the First Confederation, they achieved something terrible and wonderful. They transcended physical limitations. They became something more than flesh and blood. And then they vanished, leaving behind weapons and technology that we barely understand. Are you sure you want to know what happened to them? Dr. Jiho met her eyes without flinching. We've already activated weapons that could destroy the galaxy. Whatever we find in those archives can't be worse than what we've already done. The representative laughed, a bitter sound. That's where you're wrong, Doctor. What you find might be much, much worse. But it's your right to know. Your ancestors' legacy is yours to claim, for better or worse. The negotiations concluded. Treaties would be signed, agreements formalized, reparations scheduled. But the real work was just beginning. Humanity had forced the galaxy to accept them as equals. Now they would learn the truth about their past and discover why the Council had feared them all along. The Annihilation Protocol remained active, a constant reminder that humanity would never again be vulnerable to the whims of others. The galaxy had a new power to contend with, one that remembered the blood of its murdered Envoy and refused to forgive. The archives were vast beyond comprehension. Dr. Ji-ho An stood in the central data chamber of the Council's oldest repository, surrounded by holographic displays that stretched from floor to ceiling. 10,000 years of hidden history floated before his eyes, waiting to be explored. His hands trembled as he began accessing the files marked with the highest security classifications. The first document he opened was dated 9,847 years ago in Council time. It was a military report from a species called the Torvan hierarchy, long since extinct. The report described first contact with what it called the human expanse. Ji-ho read with growing fascination and horror. The First Confederation hadn't just been an empire. It had been the dominant force in the galaxy. While other species were still learning to build spacecraft, ancient humanity had already mastered quantum manipulation, dimensional travel, and something the report called consciousness projection. They could transfer their minds between bodies, could exist as pure energy, could reach across the stars with their thoughts alone. But the reports also described humanity's arrogance. The First Confederation had viewed other species as children, sometimes as pets. They had imposed their will across the galaxy, not through violence, but through sheer technological superiority. Resistance was impossible when humans could simply reprogram your ships, collapse your wormholes, or turn off your stars with a thought. Ji-ho pulled up another file, this one from a Council predecessor organization. It described something called the Limitation Protocols. His blood ran cold as he read. When humanity had vanished, the Council's founders had made a decision. Any time humans re-emerged in the galaxy, they would be suppressed. Their colonies would be restricted. Their technology would be limited through strategic sanctions and regulatory oversight. The goal was clear. Never allow humanity to achieve the heights of the First Confederation again. They've been sabotaging us from the beginning, Ji-ho muttered to himself. He dove deeper into the archives. The next section detailed what had happened to the First Confederation. The records were fragmentary, conflicting, but a picture slowly emerged. The ancient humans had been conducting experiments, trying to achieve what they called post-biological existence. They wanted to shed their physical forms entirely and exist as pure consciousness in a higher, dimensional space. The experiment had succeeded. Sort of. The last recorded transmission from the First Confederation came from a research station orbiting a black hole in the galactic core. The message was simple and terrifying. We have achieved transcendence. We are leaving. Goodbye. Then nothing. Across thousands of worlds, billions of humans simply vanished. Their cities stood empty. Their ships drifted unmanned. Their weapons and technology remained, but the people were gone. The other species of the galaxy had breathed a sigh of relief and worked quickly to ensure humans could never threaten them again. Ji-ho sat back, processing what he had learned. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. They had ascended. They had become something beyond physical existence. But did that mean they were still out there somewhere, watching? Or had they moved so far beyond this reality that they no longer cared about the material universe? He compiled his findings and sent them to Earth Command. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were the heirs to the most powerful civilization the galaxy had ever known. The Annihilation Protocol suddenly made more sense. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a rediscovered tool from a species that had learned to manipulate reality itself. On the bridge of the Immortal, Commander Daeun Song received the stand-down order with relief so profound it made him dizzy. "Attention all crew," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We have received authorization to deactivate primary systems. Stage 2 will not proceed. I repeat, Stage 2 will not proceed. The bridge crew erupted in cheers. Some were crying. Diane understood. They had been prepared to tear apart the fabric of spacetime to defend humanity. Now they didn't have to. The galaxy had blinked first. Begin shutdown procedures, he ordered his executive officer. But maintain quantum entanglement with the network. We're not fully standing down. Not yet. The process of deactivating the reality anchors would take weeks. Each system had to be carefully powered down to avoid creating the very catastrophe they had threatened. Across human space, 300 ships began the delicate work of releasing their grip on spacetime. The universe breathed a little easier. On New Bizon, Ji-Wan Lai stood in the main square of the colony's capital city. Around her, colonists were returning from the evacuation shelters. They looked confused and exhausted. Most still didn't understand what had happened. They had been told it was a security exercise. The truth was classified at the highest levels. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on Ji-Wan's sleeve. Administrator Lee, can we go home now? My toys are still there. Ji-Wan knelt down to the girl's level and smiled. Yes, sweetheart. You can go home now. Everything is going to be okay. The girl ran off to find her parents. Ji-Wan stood, looking up at the sky. Somewhere up there, the galaxy had just learned a hard lesson. She hoped they would remember it. She hoped humanity would never have to activate the protocol again. But she also knew that as long as it existed, humanity would never be helpless against those who wished them harm. Back on Earth. In the control center, engineer Soman Yoon monitored the dimensional stress fractures. They were beginning to stabilize as the anchor ships powered down. The danger of accidental universal collapse was receding. She had been awake for 72 hours straight. Now she finally allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. Dr. Son Ho Beek and Dr. Yuna Kong joined her in the control room. They looked as exhausted as she felt. We're not dismantling it, Son Ho said quietly. The protocol. Admiral Park made it clear. We're keeping it active. I know, Soman replied. We're just putting it to sleep. It'll be ready if we ever need it again. I hope we never do, Yuna said. The calculations show that if we had gone to Stage 3, the cascade would have been irreversible. We came within hours of destroying not just the galaxy, but potentially the entire universe. Everything. All of existence. Gone because we wanted revenge for one murder. It wasn't about revenge, Son Ho said firmly. It was about survival. The Council wanted to prove they could kill us with impunity. Admiral Park proved they couldn't. That's what deterrence is. Making sure your enemies know that attacking you costs more than they're willing to pay. Yuna nodded slowly. I understand the logic. I just hope we never have to use it again. On the Council station, Ambassador Sora Han stood before the reformed Galactic Council. The chamber looked the same, but everything had changed. 3 new seats had been added to the upper tier, each marked with Earth's symbol. Human representatives now sat as equals among the council members. Sora spoke, her voice carrying through the chamber and across the quantum broadcast network to billions of viewers throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Minho Kim gave his life serving humanity's interests. His murder was meant to frighten us into submission. Instead, it showed the galaxy who we are. We are not a species that submits. We are not a species that forgives easily. We are survivors, descended from survivors, inheritors of an empire that once ruled the stars. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Annihilation Protocol remains active. It will always remain active. We do not wish to use it. We hope we never have to use it again. But it exists as a reminder and a promise. Any attempt to subjugate humanity will result in mutual annihilation. Any attempt to destroy us will destroy you. We do not seek to rule the galaxy, but we will not be ruled by it either." Sora's expression softened slightly. "However, we also offer cooperation. Humanity is not interested in conquest or domination. We have learned from the mistakes of our ancestors. The First Confederation believed themselves superior to all other life. We do not share that belief. We are one species among many, each with our own strengths and weaknesses. We propose a new model for galactic governance, not rule by the strong over the weak, but genuine cooperation among equals." The council chamber was silent. Then, slowly, one by one, the council members rose in acknowledgement. It wasn't quite respect. It was still too soon for that. But it was recognition. Humanity had forced itself onto the galactic stage and could not be ignored or suppressed again. Diplomat Minseo Park stood in Earth's new embassy, watching the ceremony via holographic display. She had fought for years to get humanity a voice in galactic affairs. Minho had fought even longer. Now it had taken a threat of mutual annihilation to achieve what diplomacy alone could not. She felt no satisfaction in that, only a deep weariness. Her communicator chimed. It was Admiral Hyjin Park. "Ambassador Park, well done. The treaties are being formalized as we speak." "At what cost, Admiral?" "We threatened to destroy the galaxy. We came within hours of actually doing it." "I know, but it worked. Humanity is safe. That was always the goal. And the protocol? We're really keeping it active." "Yes, powered down, but always ready. The galaxy needs to remember what happens when you push us too far." Minseo ended the call and looked out the window at the station's view of space. Somewhere out there, 300 ships maintained their vigil. Somewhere in the archives, the secrets of humanity's forgotten past waited to be fully explored. And somewhere beyond physical reality, perhaps the First Confederation watched, wondering if their descendants had learned from their mistakes or were doomed to repeat them. On Earth, in a small garden in Seoul, a memorial was being dedicated to Ambassador Minho Kim. His daughter, now a young woman, stood before the monument reading the inscription carved into black stone. "Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive." But next to those words, added after the crisis, was a new line. "But Earth can choose mercy." Fleet Admiral Hyjin Park stood at the back of the ceremony, in civilian clothes, unrecognized by most of the attendees. She had activated the protocol. She had brought the galaxy to the brink of destruction. She had been prepared to kill billions to avenge one man and ensure humanity's survival. The weight of that would stay with her forever. Minho's daughter stepped up to speak. "My father believed in peace," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "He believed in dialogue and understanding. His death showed us that sometimes peace is not possible through words alone. Sometimes you must make your enemies afraid to hurt you. But fear alone is not peace. It is merely the absence of war." She looked at the crowd. "My father would not want us to become what the First Confederation became. Arrogant rulers who saw others as beneath them. He would want us to be strong enough to defend ourselves, but wise enough to seek genuine cooperation. That is his legacy. That is what we must honor." The crowd bowed their heads in silence. Admiral Hyjin wiped tears from her eyes. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Now humanity had to learn to be worthy of the power they wielded. The Annihilation Protocol remained active, its ships positioned, its weapons ready. It was a sword of Damocles hanging over the galaxy, a reminder that humanity would never again be vulnerable. The Council had executed a human envoy expecting submission. They had received defiance. They had learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or violence, Boo.